What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dieting from the Inside Out. If you are new here, welcome to the show. My name is Jared Hamilton, and I'm really excited to have you in the house today. Now, today is a really cool episode, and I'm really excited about it. You guys are going to get introduced to a good friend of mine. His name is Nick Ross, and he has an insane story to tell you that's going to change your life. It's one of those kind of episodes. But before we get into all the goods, I do want to have a really big thank you to the sponsors of the show. Sponsor number one is Flex Pro Meals, longtime supporter of the show, guys. It's one of those things where I truly believe in this day and age, convenience is the number one thing in all of our lives. If you do not have what you're doing, like your program and your life convenient, it's really hard to be massively successful when our lives are predicated on more convenience. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I think the more you can make whatever you're going through more convenient, the more sustainable it is. So for me, partnering with FlexPro was a no-brainer, because I know for me with my day-to-day, I need massive amounts of convenience with my food, right? So for me, it's one of those things where having my fridge just already not even fully stocked, it doesn't even have to be at that level, just having some meals on deck that are high in protein, that taste really good, that you don't have to think about, that's also going to save you money, is just one of the best things ever. Because there are so many times I know in my day-to-day where either we were behind getting groceries, or food's taking longer to get made than we planned, or I'm on the go and I just need to grab something, get out of the house. So I just go through a drive-through. But the problem is you're going to spend way more money doing that. It's not convenient at all. And eating out a dozen times a week, or maybe not a dozen, but a lot during the week, can make it really hard to keep things like your fat loss goals in check and whatnot. So having FlexPro in my fridge all the time is really helpful. So big thank you to them. And if that's kind of where you're at, where you find this whole food thing is really complicated and hard to be consistent with because of just the craziness, definitely want to check out their menu. It's insane what they have on there. And because you're a listener of the podcast, they are offering 20% off anything so that you buy on their entire website. So if you go to flexpromeals.com, but then use my code at checkout, Hamilton Trained, not only does it support your boy, but you're also going to save 20% off everything, which is pretty legit. So now our second sponsor of the show, big thank you to First Form. Guys, I'm telling you, you guys know me. I'm not a big supplement pusher. Supplements should not be the cornerstone of your program, but they absolutely have a time and their place. Whether it be something like me, where it's my joints are always hurting because I got joint problems. So having something that's going to help those ongoing, so I don't have to eat ibuprofen and Tylenol every day. Or maybe you just suck at getting your protein intake in. Maybe you eat only plant-based and you're having a really hard time finding a good plant-based protein that doesn't upset your stomach, or whatever the case is. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, First Form is the one spot I am so confident in going to, no matter what my needs are with that stuff or clients' needs are, because not only from the product quality to the mission of the company, the people that run it, to the CEO leading the entire thing, on every level, First Form is a landslide. So if you're not sure what to take or this deal with supplements, I'll leave my supplement video in the description of this podcast. But also, I'll also leave my link for First Form down below. That way I can save you some money on some shipping. I'm telling you, just go check out their stuff. See if you're looking to upgrade maybe what you're taking, or if you're brand new to this and just want to get started, I'll leave that link down below. That way I can save you some money on some free priority shipping. And yeah, I know it'll be a game changer. Now, excuse me. We're getting into today's episode. So I'm interviewing my good friend and mentor, Nick Ross. Nick is a behemoth of a human, whether you ever meet him in person and realize just how big this dude is, to just the way he talks, the way he thinks, and everything. You guys know, one of my favorite things to talk about is it's never too late to change your life. It's never too late to change your identity and to really make something out of your life and really dive into that. And Nick is the epitome of that. Everything from, and he'll get into it, everything from having cancer to the craziness he grew up into, and all this trauma and all this crazy stuff that I'll let him get into, to now where he's at right now, where he helps people change their lives and he makes you feel something every time he talks. I've had the pleasure of seeing Nick speak several times in person. And it's one of those things where when he talks, you feel it, and you're probably going to shed a tear or two. You're probably going to get a couple goosebumpsy chilly chills with some of the stories he has in his background, and then the tactics on actually changing your life for good. So this is exactly why I wanted Nick on the podcast. So I know you're going to get a lot out of it. Be sure and stick around for the whole thing, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, we are live. What's up, Nick? I really appreciate you hopping on the podcast and taking some time out of your day. I appreciate that, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Absolutely honored to be here. Great opportunity, and hope you've had an impactful day.
I love it. I love it. Well, I already talked about it in the about kind of a little bit about you and like your and my relationship in the intro, but I'd love for you to get in a little bit of your story before we get into all the goods. But basically, like, what's your story? You know, where you came, how you grew up, where you came from, cancer, the whole 9 yards, to kind of where you're at right now.
Yeah, I'll give you the really hyper accelerated version of it. I was born and raised in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. So that's Northeast Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes west of New York City and about an hour and a half north of Philadelphia. And I grew up on a horse farm. So from the age of 6 years old, I worked my ass off and came from a very small family, only child. If you know anything about farmers and living on a farm, they usually have lots of kids. Mm-hmm. It's free labor. Some child labor laws were definitely broken growing up, I think. But that I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like, my kids, they're not going to summer camp. I'm going to find a farmer and they're going to work the farm for the summer. But what I quickly found out growing up is that when I played sports or I was at practice, I didn't have to work. I didn't have to muck horse manure, and I didn't have to build fences and all this like hard labor. And so I played sports my whole entire life. It was my passion. And football is everything that I loved growing up. And that actually turned into a passion for ice hockey later in my middle school years, and went on to play ice hockey for the rest of my life. Like, actually probably just stopped playing hockey about 3-4 years ago when bodybuilding became really important in my life and couldn't risk injury on the ice. I got in a car accident when I was 16 on a way to the mall to go get clothes for the fashion show for the high school, like whatever event they were doing. I wasn't driving, was with another 16-year-old. He cut across traffic. We got T-boned at 65 miles an hour. I don't remember much of anything. I was ripped out of the car with jaws of life, taken to the hospital, broke 6 ribs, severe brain trauma. It was a mess. And I was only 16 years old and didn't really have the skill sets or the character at the time to deal with why most likely my athletic career had gotten robbed from me from this car accident. And during that point in my life, I fell back and resorted to a lot of coping mechanism and soothing tactics that we all learn as children. And unfortunately, that kind of spiraled out of control to addiction, drinking, over socializing, saying yes to every event, being a people pleaser. And that basically was my life from 16 to 32. I went to college, first person in my family to go to college, got 2 degrees, moved to Hollywood of all places because I was in the music industry and had a music degree, and continued to live that life until the age of 32, living as a single bachelor, moving all across the country. About every 18 months, I only worked for one company, and they would move me to city across the country. And as a young bachelor, I got a raise every time I moved. I got to live in a lot of cool cities. So I was like, hey, this is the life. But I never took care of myself. And I was always the type of person that said yes to everything. Like, if it was a good time, a birthday party, bowling, like any excuse, a football game, you name it, 2-for-1s, I was there. And I wasn't taking care of myself. And all of this was a soothing tactic for stress, anxiety, the doubt, the worry, the fear, all of the imposter syndrome that I had my whole entire life growing up, and just continue to run these frameworks in my life. Age of 32. March 24th, 2016, the day before, on the 23rd, I smoked Marlboro Reds for 16 years. So after that car accident, went downhill pretty quick, busting out the Budweisers, the Jameson, and smoking packs of Reds for 16 years. And I woke up, I had this lump in my throat, and I'm like, man, I think I have cancer in my throat. Like, that was my first thought. Don't know why that went there. And I never went to the doctor. Like, even if you were like, hey, who's your general doctor? I was like, I don't know. Because at that age, you're invincible still, and you don't think anything's wrong with you. So I ended up going to the doctor. She looks at me. She's like, you're totally fine. The week before, I had the flu. 2 weeks before that, at the age of 32, I had 4 wisdom teeth surgically removed. So she just gave me some antibiotics, said, you're sick. It's this, it's that. Went home. Still didn't feel right. And at the end of the night, I went in, took a shower, was drying myself off. And when I was drying myself off, I felt a lump in my testicle. And at that moment in time, I had no evidence criteria that it was cancer, but I'm telling you, on the day that I thought I had cancer in my throat, I found a lump on my testicle. I then went on to Wikipedia, which is the worst mistake.
We're terrible.
Not Wikipedia, WebMD. I'm sorry.
Oh, even
WebMD.
worse. Even worse.
Yeah. WebMD. And it basically said, like, look, if you touch the area where there's a bump and a tumor and doesn't hurt, it's probably a tumor or cancerous. If you do touch it and it does hurt, here's a list of other things, but it ain't that. When I touched it, it didn't hurt. So I didn't sleep that night. Long story short, guys, I went, saw a urologist, begged for an appointment on a Friday out of a network of 40. They were booked. God bless this young urologist. He foregoed his lunch break to see me. They examine it. They're like, we'll call you on Monday, because it was Friday, 4 or 5 o'clock maybe. And 45 minutes later, I drove from the urologist to my apartment. And I remember opening the door, my phone rang, and it was the urologist. And he said, and I know this now, ethically, they're not supposed to tell you this over the phone, but I got a phone call, and the words were, you have cancer, you have surgery on Monday. And I was in an apartment by myself at the age of 32, nothing of substance. I was not a consequential man at all. I had contributed nothing to anything. My significance level was at 0. The only thing I had accomplished in my life was being a really good Madden player. Like, that was about it. And having some success in sales. And, yeah, that was a heavy moment. I remember in that moment, the first thing that went through my head was, you did this to yourself. And there was shame, guilt. And, that was something, man, you want to talk about trauma work, unpacking some pain. It took years to not blame myself.
It's for those listening. This is one of the reasons I wanted to get Nick on here, is because, Nick, one of the things that I love most about talking with you and watching you speak is you can move people and like feel everything that's coming out of your mouth. It's not just like it's not just words. Like, back in Arizona, when you were speaking, like in the last time I saw you talk, it's like everyone around me, I was feeling chills. Everyone was, when talking about this stuff, which is why I think this is so important to talk about, getting into this, especially under the category of like how to change your life, because especially having talked with you, met your mom, hearing your story, like you're nowhere near the same kind of person you were now compared to when you were before, like unrecognizable. So like for you, especially in our world, like people that are listening to the podcast and things like that, so many people are so hesitant to change their situation because of whatever. I grew up this way, social conditioning. My mom taught me this. My dad taught me this. And from how much of a 180 you've made in your life, how does someone go about like rewriting their story, changing their identity, and really getting into this side of things?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's 2 questions I'm really answering all the time, just with clients, friends, people around me, people that reach out on social media because of the podcast. And I think they're just 2 such basic questions that people just never think about it. It's just that simple. The first question is this: who are you? Who are you? People can't answer that question. They have no clue who they are. But I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm going to tell you exactly who you are. You are the person who changes themselves. That's all you are. That's all you're capable of being. And it's your job to expand your container and who you are. Because if you do not have what you want, it's because you have an identity that does not support the outcome. And if you don't even know who you are, then who's taking up all the space and conversation in your consciousness? Is it the self-sabotager? Is it the victim? Is it the imposter syndrome? Is it your LinkedIn personality? Is it your smiley work and high inflection voice person? Is it the person that you show your moms because she thinks you're a certain type of woman and you're getting certain things done in your life? Or is it the final mask that you take off when no one else is looking? Because that's who your true character is. So the first thing that you really need to identify is, who the hell am I? Because I find that most people are multiple personalities. And when you have multiple personalities and multiple voices conflicting for space in the talk track of your mind, how can you communicate with your highest self? How can you communicate with your calling when you haven't even named it? You don't even know who you are. And so what's the first thing that you do when you get a dog? You name it. Why? So you can call it. And so if you don't have what you want in your life, it's because you haven't labeled it. You haven't named it, and you don't know who you are. Now, how do I figure out who the hell that I am? Well, you have to figure out what you want. These two things are tied together. Here's the second question that people cannot answer. What do you want? People don't know. And because of that lack of evidence criteria of what they want in their life, they cannot be satisfied. How can you satisfy yourself if you don't even know what you want? And then the next question is, can anyone satisfy you if you don't know what you want? How can your kids satisfy you? How can your husband satisfy you? What's wrong, honey? Nothing. Are you sure? Yeah, nothing. Everything's fine. Like us guys, we know nothing's fine. And we're going to dig till we get that evidence criteria so we can solve the problem, so we can label the pain. Right? And so these are fundamental parts. Like, who I want you to be is always the person who changes yourself, but I want you to change yourself into your highest identity, your highest self, your true version of yourself. And then your job is to exceed that vision of yourself. I want you to exceed the creator's vision for yourself. So when you get to the creator, when you get to the pearly gates, or however you align yourself spiritually, they're like, there's a checklist, right? Like that checklist God has for me, man. I just want to keep going. And nope, I got that done and that. Oh yeah, I did this too. Oh, yeah, I even did that. And I want to exceed that expectation and that vision. But the only way that I can do that is to create the vision. The only way I can create the vision is to get to clarity. The only way to get to clarity is I don't want to sit down with a pen, piece of paper, and write down 20 desires, 20 goals that you want. Just start there. It's so simple. It's so basic. I've studied some of the most successful people in every sector area of life. They all say the same thing. So how can I argue with them? And they all say, write down your goals, because it's called spelling for a reason, right? You're casting a spell. You're bringing thought form into the physical reality. So here, I'll go quickly. Write down 20 goals so you can figure out what you want. You're going to prioritize them in the order of the top 5 most important over X amount of time. Let's say a year. These are the 20 goals I have, but here's the top 5 most important that I accomplished this year. The other 15 you get rid of, because those are the distractions. You do not aim for those. Those are no longer the target. You hit the top 5 and you hit the top 5 in 6 months instead of a year, then go get a piece of them 15, fill them back in. That's cool. But you don't need the Xbox 10 or the brand new iPhone 30 or the new Jordans or the Louis or the red bottoms or the new vacation until you get rid of, or until you hit those top 5, like serious goals in your life. Now we start to get evidence criteria of what we want, and we can move towards that. And so who are you? Just get to the point. You only are the person who changes yourself. Let's not make that overcomplicated. And what do you want? Get absolute crystal clear clarity.
I love that so much. It's interesting. I think even like when people are, let's say, even something as simple as applying for coaching, and I can't tell you how many calls I've been on where go, all right, well, what are we working for? Like, where do you want to be? And they go, I don't know. You tell me. And I'm like, I'm just the blueprint guy. I'm like, we're just showing you where to go, but you have to tell me where you want to be at, Why is it, do you think so many people have issues, on those two things, who they are and what do they want? Like, because you're right. No one knows the answers to those. So why is it so many people have trouble with that?
Yeah. Well, let's get deep here for a second. You have your conscious mind, you have your unconscious mind. And then in between those two, we have what's called the analytical mind. So the only way you can become consciously aware of what you're doing subconsciously is to go into the analytical mind. All right. It's hard to go into the analytical mind and be conscientious and aware when you're constantly in a fear-based survival state, because you cannot be creative and run for your life at the same time. It makes no sense for you to paint a beautiful painting or write a beautiful poem while you're running from a saber-toothed tiger. Makes no sense. And so many people don't even realize that 95% of their brain activity, the thought, and by the way, hundreds, if not billions, I forget the number, maybe billions of thoughts a day or transactions going through the brain, 95% of them are subconscious. That means below consciousness. That means your behaviors and these algorithms and these programs that you store deep in your subconscious, you just run them over and over and over and over again. You're not aware. They're called AFAB, automatic fixed action behaviors. They're built into you genetically for survival, but you also pick them up as you're learning and growing up, because your brain is in a theta state from the age of birth to 7, which is basically a state of hypnosis. And you learn and you pick up everything and you are imprinting on them very easily. That's why we say kids are like sponges. They literally are. And at that age range, especially from the age of 3 to 5, you learn all of your soothing mechanisms, your soothing techniques, all of those things from your parents, and you're picking up on it. And as you get older, you rely on this. This is why we have people that these generational problems and families that exist and go on, these generational curses. People don't even realize it. They're not even aware that this program and algorithm is running in their subconscious. Then it's only 5% of your activity daily is actually conscious thinking. And so we know negative thoughts. We know with science and MRIs and CAT scans, it's been proven that living in a negative state and negative thoughts and being in a neurotic state creates chronic disease. We know that. We know that. That is truth. You cannot argue it. So isn't it obvious that having positive thoughts and living in a positive state and thinking positively for yourself can also heal yourself?
Absolutely.
But you can't do that if you're constantly in a survival-based fear state of just toxic thought. You have to start, step one is becoming aware. Like, you have to become aware, because you can't summon that in which you are not. If you're not that person, you have to become aware to become it.
I love that. That sounds like that sounds like Joe Dispenza 101 right here. Like,
it is Joe Dispenza 101.
I love Joe Dispenza. Well, because we talk about this a lot, where it's like we can't escape a jail we don't know we're trapped inside of. And most people are totally oblivious to this stuff, what they're struggling with, their old patterns, their sabotage mechanisms and things like that. So for someone who's been, let's say, been living obliviously, how does one start to become aware of this stuff?
Well, the first step is stop listening to yourself and start talking to yourself.
That's
step one. Step two is vision drives decision. Like, you have to get clarity. It's not, I want more money. Great. Here's $1. Get out of here, kid. It's, I want to make 7 figures by this date. I'm getting in my car. What type of car is it? What is the weather outside? What does my hand feel like on the grain of the wood on the steering wheel? What is the bank teller's name? You know, what's on the counter? Like, getting crystal clear clarity of the day, who's there, the environment, because what you want to do is set your mind into your highest possibility. All right. And so there's 3 massive laws that are in play that you have to become aware of. Most people, because of media and The Secret and Oprah, know about law of vibration. Law of attraction. Most people know about law of attraction, but what they're not aware of, law of vibration. Okay. And that's the first law at play. And so what law of vibration states is that, and I believe this is also some Dispenza, is that our thoughts on the quantum field are electric charges, and our feelings on the quantum field are magnetic charges. Once again, science. So if you combine your thoughts and your feelings, you now have an electromagnetic charge. And by the way, each one of your cells, and you have like 7 billion cells in you, is 0.7 volts. So you're literally a nuclear reactor of potential and energy and electromagnetic charge to attract what you want in your life. But you have to vibrate there first. So how do I vibrate there? I vibrate there because on a term that most people are massively confused on, which is called mindset. You have to set your mind into the vision and the highest possibility that you want for yourself. That goes back to vision drives decision. You have to get clarity of your future, crystal clear of what you want. And if you set your mind intellectually and emotionally there long enough, and you work long enough to vibrate at that highest possibility, you will start to attract and manifest your desires into the physical world. It sounds hokey. It sounds like rainbows and unicorns and leprechauns. I'm telling you right now, this shit is so basic. And you look at other people who are more successful than you point the finger at the 1% at the top of every competence hierarchy in the world, in the industry, as a parent, as a community, as a leader, as a business person. And these people who are exceeding and dominating that we point our finger at and we blame, they are doing this. And it is the most basic steps, right? And I'm telling you from a person who 3-4 years ago spent 5 or 6 days a week at a bar, spending all his time, his circle of 5 were talking sports around a television at a bar, 5-6 days a week and playing video games. You can massively and radically transform your life by adopting such simple philosophies into your life.
I love that. That's so good. I think a lot of people when it comes to this stuff, everyone instantly is like, oh, that's the airy fairy. That's the hopey dopey. But it's like, I don't understand why people still think it is, when in reality, anyone who thinks it is don't have results. You know what I'm saying? It's like the people who think it's usually airy fairy, whether it be achieving like monetary success or relationships or weight loss. It's usually the people who think it's not, this stuff doesn't work, is they don't have the results to speak of. You know what I mean?
Typically, I find that those people have won once, never won, or don't even know what winning is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is, so in your opinion, how does someone start with like, okay, I get where you're coming from. Like, where do I even start with this? Other than we got to get clarity. And then after we have clarity around like, okay, here's who I am and here's what I want. Where do people go now?
So I use a framework that's called RPM. It comes from Tony Robbins. It's called Result, Focus, Purpose, Driven, Massive Action Plan. What RPM is going to do, like in a car, is going to create momentum. So we don't want motivation. Motivation is a fleeting emotion. Like all emotions, it comes and goes. The only thing that's important about motivation is what you do when you're not motivated. That's it. So we want momentum. Momentum is velocity and power, right? I'm sorry, mass and velocity. That's how we get momentum. So how do we get velocity? We get velocity by acting today, taking action. How do we get mass? Well, we do that by stacking wins or getting the evidence criteria of what winning the day looks like. Like, here's my 5 steps to win the day, accomplishing that and creating momentum in your life towards your highest self. You have to have an aim and a focus and a direction. This is why you have to have the goals. This is the result. So here's the R. So you have to be result focused, because that kicks in RAS, which is your reticular activating system. It's part of your brain. It's a very important part of your brain. And what it does is like a servo mechanism or a heat sinking missile. Whatever you tell it to focus on, it follows. Or on a very high quality camera on the lens, you tell it to focus here, and then it blurs out everything around it. It distorts and deletes and generalizes, as our brain does, everything around it, and just focuses on that one thing. This is why you can buy a yellow Jeep. You never saw yellow Jeeps before. And now you're riding around this yellow Jeep. There's yellow Jeeps everywhere. So we have to be result focused, an aim, a direction, something that is noble, a purpose, a mission, right? You have to be able to have a responsibility to take care of yourself, like Jordan Peterson states. And I love that line. Like, only you can actually change yourself. And so we have to have that result. You have to get evidence criteria and crystal clear of what you want and the time frame and duration that it's going to take to get there. Now we need a purpose. This is where most people mess up. Most people have some idea of like kind of what they want in goals, but they don't have the emotional driver. They're trying to use something else to get themselves there. And so what we want to do is now have our purpose and our promise. And this is making a promise that is bigger than yourself. It gives itself a purpose. So next to those 5 goals that I have you write down, you now write the names of the individuals that it's going to impact next to them and how it's going to impact them. And it's not mom, dad, brother, or sister. It's their name. Jennifer Baker, Nancy Baker, Justin Baker, Sarah Garner, right? Like their names, and then how it's going to impact them. For me, I have this old school goal of when I was 8 years old. I made a promise. I told you I loved playing sports. I wanted to be a professional athlete. The reason I wanted to be a professional athlete so I could buy my mom her dream horse farm that she didn't have to work, because my mom always broke her back on the farm and could never enjoy it. And I thought that was my ticket to be able to do that. Here I am 38 years later, post-cancer, chasing that dream in professional bodybuilding. And my emotional driver is my mom and that promise that I made to her, because now it's bigger than me. Now I've put something above me. And when I put something above me, I have to reach for it, and it is higher than me. It's my highest calling. It's me expanding my container to reach a goal. And who I become on the accomplishment of that goal can never be taken away from me. Can't be. And so now we have our purpose. Now we have our emotional driver. Now we have what you do not have, and most people are seeking, a compelling future. Now I have a reason to get up on the first alarm. Now I have a reason for my feet to hit the ground. Now I'm going to be grateful and humble for the chance and the choice I got today to wake up. Because now it's bigger than you. Like the days I didn't want to do the cardio, the days for 2 hours a day, the days I didn't want to get up at 3 a.m. for 125 days in a row, the days I didn't want to eat another ounce of chicken, the days that I went through drinking no water. How could I look myself in the mirror and say, Nick, today's the day you get to take off? Because you're almost 40 years old. You haven't accomplished that promise, and your mom's not getting any younger. So I'm going to take the day off? Really? You're not going to do the cardio today? And so I can't answer that question. I can't look myself in the mirror and say, nah, dude, take a play off today. I can't. You know, I have other goals that surround my business and my teammates. Like, I'm going to do the extra email. I'm going to do the extra work. I'm going to put in the extra hours. I'm going to over deliver, because at the end of the year, there's this massive goal, and we hit that goal. My whole entire team gets to do something I've always dreamed about doing together. And so the days I don't want to do that, how do I look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, Nick, those 30 other people that rely on you, you can take the play off today. So that's the emotional driver for me. And that's what most people are missing, because that's what fills up your tank, man. Right? You have to think about this as a journey. Like, where are your resources? How are you filling up the tank? Like, literally. And then lastly, you have to have a massive action plan. You have to have a map. And for me, on Circle of W, what we teach on my podcast is 5 actionable steps to win the day. And they're small incremental wins. So for most people, you just need some wins, man. You need evidence criteria of what a win looks like. By the way, there's wins everywhere, and wins are potential. Like, as I move my hand through this air, there's potential of energy everywhere. Like, you don't understand. You're surrounded by potential energy and wins. So for a lot of us, and when I work with people on result coaching, the first win of your day is make your damn bed. Make your bed, man. You know, we've all heard the YouTube and the general talk about this,
Yep.
But it's right, dude. Make your bed. And if you had a really bad day, guess what? You got a beautiful, comfortable bed to get into.
Yep.
And relax, right?
Absolutely.
Make your bed. Drink a gallon of water. Go on X amount of steps. Listen to 30 minutes of a podcast. Read 15 pages of a book around self-development or a hobby or something that you're passionate about. Those are just 5 wins. Now, no matter what happens in the course of the day, you can get those things done before 12. Go out, have fun, do the 4th of July, whatever, but you won the day. But those 5 actionable steps have to reinforce the goal. Like, they have to be tied to the goal. So now I'm incrementally moving closer and closer and closer towards the vision for myself. And I'm always trying to bring that to life.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people, I'm really glad you brought that up. I think a lot of people have a tendency, they only consider their wins, like the W's, on an outcome. like when I lose the 50 pounds, when I make the money, when I get the car, whatever it is, where one of the things that we teach here a lot is the wins are all in your actions, right? Even if especially in the absence of the result, right? It's going to take a minute to lose 50 pounds. It's going to take a while to make, the $1 million or whatever the outcome is. But I think a lot of people forget that a W is the list, is not always the outcome.
No, you have to, in NLP, which I love, is neuro-linguistics programming, which is one of the finest therapies, I believe, in moving people from pain to possibility. And I also teach it in sales because it's a great emotional connection point for people, is that you have to chunk down your goals into like bite-sized, manageable pieces. And that's why I believe in these small incremental wins. Because here's the metaphor I use. Every day, if you can just deposit a few wins into that bank of your highest self, guess what you get to do? You get to make a massive return. You get a massive withdrawal sometime in the future, right? And don't forget that. I mean, there's, no inflation. No one's going to tax you in that. That's all yours, man. Like you earn that. And that's what I'm talking about is like some of you right now are pint-sized people. You need to become 10-gallon people. And in order to do that, you have to be able to expand your container. Well, how do you expand your container? For me, the best way is to acquire knowledge. And I think really the three best areas to expand your container: influence, persuasion, and communication. It has nothing to do with the fact that I teach sales. It has to do with this. I want you to live in an extraordinary life. And this is very Tony Robbins of me. And the only way to live an extraordinary life is to have extraordinary relationships. Well, how do you have extraordinary relationships? Extraordinary communication. Right? And so your quality of life is really dependent on how you communicate first and foremost with yourself, so you can have the healthiest relationship with yourself, an honest, loving, caring relationship with yourself that realizes that, hey, this imposter guy, he's always going to be here. So I'm going to make friends with him and I'm going to do the best I can to control the controllable daily. Right? And that communication, learning how to communicate with yourself and becoming aware is the first step. The second step is you have to implement it. You have to execute. Like these things that people tell you that you hear probably time and time and time again. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new. Execute it. That's what separates people. Execution is worshiped in this world. Absolutely. And I think I was a little ET.
I love it. I love it. So along those lines though, let me stay in there. Along the same lines of building the relationship with oneself, because especially in the realm of like coaching or weight loss and all this stuff and transformation and changing your life, I find so many people have the most horrendous relationship with themselves, right? It's like every second, like I was speaking with a lady today, she's one of our clients, and one of the things that we do is to help really facilitate and celebrate wins is we have different things set up to basically highlight those wins and force them to realize you're crushing, because most people are crushing and they don't realize they're crushing. Well, one thing that she was doing is she's like, in her case, she quit binge eating. That's done and over. She is showing up for herself when she would have quit a dozen times. She's seen progress, all these huge wins, enough to where like the scale drops and she's like, it's probably wrong. Inches are physically down, like went from 44 to 42. She's like, I probably measured off. I'm still binging, so it's not that big of a deal. And I looked at, I didn't look at her because we were on the phone, and I said, you realize you're setting up a game where it's impossible for you to win. Mm-hmm. She's like, I never thought about that. So why is like, how do we fix that when someone's relationship with themselves is that bad, where everything they do is self-deprecative and where they can't even honor, they're crushing on paper on all these different facets. And they're like, no, here's why that's not true. Here's why that's not true. Here's why that's not true.
It's a deep question. Suffering is when I'm worrying about me. That's when I know I suffer. When I'm constantly worrying about me, when I'm constantly in, my feelings and my emotions, those are the worst days. And that for me creates overwhelmingly, and what I've identified, I think is in every single human being, is a lack of unworthiness. That we've suffered for so long, that we've normalized suffering in our life for so long, that when we finally do get a little peace and a little win, we got to suffer anyways. I'm going to make myself pay for this victory. And I used to do that all the time. I used to be the most guilty person, crush a big sale, hit a huge bonus where the whole team won. What am I going to do? I'm going downtown. I'm probably blowing $500 to $1,000 doing God knows what. Cause I don't remember. That's part of the problem. You know, waking up full of regrets, eating things, bloated, unhealthy, unhappy, depressed, constantly, stress, anxiety, you know, and that is what is called self-sabotaging. You're battling two people always, the imposter and the self-sabotager. And you just have to understand they're always going to be there. Like I talk about like silence the critic, bury him in barren ground and kill the imposter. But here's the truth. You have a romance with your imposter syndrome that you're not willing to admit. And your problem is that you will not drop the thing that keeps biting you. And that's the truth. Let it go, man. Drop it. Drop the damn snake. Cut the damn grass. Expose the snakes and fucking let it go. Like you have to understand that you're able to move forward, that you have everything inside of you that you already need to radically transform your life immediately after this podcast is over. That I, myself, a fool, had to wait till God put his hands around his neck and say, hey, young man, here's cancer. By the way, you have like a 9% chance of survival if this plan does not work out. And oh, by the way, even when we do this plan, there's 50% chance it comes back. Right?
Goodness, man.
And I had to reach that point to change my life. That's sad. I'm embarrassed about that. Because 16 years prior, I almost lost my life with another near-death experience. So how many near-death experiences, Nick, is it going to take till you finally wake up? Let alone all the other trouble and crimes and things that I committed and did in between those two gaps. And every single person has their story. I've never met a person that doesn't have one or two stories that they could share that would bring us all to our knees. And like sometimes I'm embarrassed to talk about my story because like, in the scale and spectrum of cancers, like testicular cancer isn't like, you know, it ain't stage 4 brain cancer. Not that we were comparing, but I had all those self-doubts about ever sharing my story. Now I go everywhere and share my story and it impacts people. And that's what's important to me. And people share their story with me. And I'm like, I can't even believe it. And so the self-realization that you already have everything that you need inside of you. Because let me ask you, Jared, have you hit rock bottom before?
I've hit my own, like what I would consider my own rock bottoms, but I'm sure there's a level deeper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everyone has their own personal rock bottom, but you've hit rock bottom. Did you get back up?
Absolutely.
Have you failed before?
Absolutely.
Did you succeed?
Absolutely.
Did you feel lost ever in your life? Like you weren't
100%.
navigating? Did you find yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so did every single other person listening to this. Now I know this because you're alive.
Mm-hmm.
So you've overcome everything that you've ever gone through in your life. What is going to be any different about this thing that you want to change in your life? And the big question for me was this. This was the moment of decision for me. I was proposed this question. Nick, if you can be great in one area of your life, why can't you be great in every area of your life? Why are you so great in sales, but such a terrible husband? Why are you so great as a husband, but a terrible father? Why can you be so great as a father, but a terrible businessman? Why is that? Because the skill sets that it took to be great in that one area, if you just applied them to these other areas of your life, you'd be winning in all areas of life. Now you'd be radically moving forward towards what you want, which for the majority of us is to build a financial wall around our family that's impenetrable so we can take care of our loved ones. Just simple decision, simple choice in a step. And what I realized is this. When I was sick, when I was a sick man, like all sick people, you only want one thing. You want to survive. You want to live. And when I only wanted one thing and I was willing to do anything for it, including going to chemotherapy 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, every other week for 2 months, which is an insane amount of chemotherapy for any human being. It was the most amount that they could give someone because my tumor was made up of some really heavy duty, nasty cancer cells. Like every tumor is mixed up of its own type of cancer tumors. And I had 2 dudes that were really, really aggressive attached to my lymphatic system. So they nuked me. And in like, that Nick that had to get out of bed on Friday on day 5 of a cycle, like the days I don't want to go to the gym, I just think about him.
Yeah.
And I had to crawl to the car. Right? Like, dude, you did that and you can't go to the gym and do leg day? Like, so I hate hypocrisy. I hate being a hypocrite because that's the split personality. When I am not aligned in my words, thoughts, and action, that's when I have anxiety. That's when I'm suffering. That's when I'm misaligned vibrationally. And if I'm thinking and saying and doing different things, one, there's nothing more terrible or confusing in this world than a man or woman that gives good advice that sets a bad example.
So true.
It's terrible. It's so confusing. It's so conflicting. And it happens in your head all the time, these conversations, this internal dialogue that you've attached past associations and past references, most likely from experiences that you had as an early child that you do not even realize you're running these programs. It's NLP teaches techniques to go into your memories and really how to reframe them, like a picture frame that you would like literally reframe. And I had to reframe, like I told you, in order to not blame myself. I said, fuck you, cancer, for a long time. I got the t-shirts. I got it all. It took me a long time to say, thank you, cancer. Right? That this did not happen to me. This happened for me. It happened to serve me. I never saw that then. But once I realized that I had all this potential inside the pain that I had stuffed in and going through that, like once I did the trauma work and let out all that pain, I made room for the potential.
I love that. I love that so much. It's interesting. I think a lot of people are stuck in the cycle of like whatever bullshit they're going through is it's to them, where there's so much magic for them in there that we just don't see.
You just have to reframe the situation, you know, like really, really, really bad example, but I want to use it because it really pissed me off, but I stayed emotionally stable and I had to reframe it. On 4th of July, went out on the boat, went out on the lake.
Like the other day, 4th of July?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And with the girls are on the lake 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is, on a rented boat. And I had a very expensive pair of Louis Vuitton sunglasses on. And I go on the lake, I go kayaking all the time. And I always have like those things that you put on the glasses that go around your neck so they don't fall off. They're in the car. I brought them. I was conscientious aware to bring them and put them on. We were in a rush. We're on the boat. I consciously remember, hey, go get them. I'm like, nah, it's so far away. I'm not going to walk over there. And then right when we're packing up the girls, the floaties, a little spider comes off the canopy on my head.
No.
And I swat it. And as I swat it, my very expensive Louis Vuitton sunglasses. And I sound like such a dork saying this, like, but I really love them. They're part of my, like, my identity. I swear to God.
They are, dude. Like, yeah, absolutely. That's terrible.
And so they went into the ocean, or they're on the bottom of Old Hickory Lake if you want to go find them in Tennessee. And I was very mad because those things cost more than the whole boat and the whole day, fireworks and everything else. And I just had to reframe it. I had to buy a new pair immediately, get them overnighted, and just reframe it into the aspect of, you know what, those were a year old and they had a bunch of scratches on them and I got a new pair. So you just have to reframe it.
That's
totally silly example, but you have to ask 3 questions, right? So these are the 3 questions of destiny. Like anytime you're going through any kind of experience, so positive or negative. So that's the other thing that people don't do is they don't like really go back to the positive experiences and the great things in their life and go back and almost like break it down like a play. Like, how did this happen? How can I repeat this? How can I duplicate this? But let's say it's a negative or painful situation. You just ask yourself 3 questions. What am I focused on? Am I focused on the wrong things, other people? Am I focused on myself? Because again, when I focus on myself, suffering is defined as me worrying about me. So when there's a painful problem and then you continue to worry only about yourself and not other people, like how to make the wrong decision right, especially for others, or how to serve others, or how you're going to make this problem benefit others, then you're going to suffer. You're going to continue to suffer. You're going to continue to sit on Netflix, binge watch, and do things that you know are no good for you. The second thing is you're going to have to ask is, did this happen to me or for me? Am I a victim of this or am I being rewarded for this? And that's the reframe. It's so easy to do, but people just get caught up in just refusing to do it. And then last question you have to ask is, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to do nothing? Or am I going to get up and am I going to take action? And those are 3 questions that I ask myself repeatedly. And you have to understand is that, again, Joe Dispenza, you're literally wiring and firing new pathways of behavior. So every time you become aware, like the circuits, the neuronal connections fire off and start becoming stronger and more connected and more connected. And then the more we use that groove, the deeper that groove gets. And so now it becomes the new pathway of behavior and electricity through your mind. And now the mind will start using that circuit instead of that old shitty circuit from Circuit City you got back in the 90s that you've been running forever. Right. And so you literally, just think about how cool that is. That's what I'm saying. You already have everything inside of you that you need. As you progress, you are literally wiring and firing new genetic code inside of yourself. You're literally growing and you're controlling that. Now there's also the opposite of that where we can continue just to like run these old programs and reinforce these old associations and references that we've made, generalizations, stereotypes that we adopt. And we're just like, the old saying, I think, therefore I am. As soon as the word I am comes out of your mouth, you automatically identify with that.
It's interesting. I think one of the super common themes of this entire talk, and especially the concept around reframing, is I think I heard this first from Ed Milet, was just the concept of like, hey, don't believe everything you think. Just because you thought it, just because you felt it, don't be so quick to believe it. You know what I mean?
My favorite aspect of this is like understanding that you're not your emotions, that I ask people this question all the time. When you drive the car down the road, do you identify as the car? No. You identify as the person operating the car. And so then it's the same question is like when your emotions kick in, are you your emotions or are you the operator of the emotions? And people get this confused. They think and by the way, I was the most guilty freaking person on planet Earth for this. I let emotions drive my life probably since the moment I was born. Right. And then from what I saw in my environment, which was a very tough environment growing up. And that got me in so much trouble. Name one thing you're not disappointed or you have regret or that you just embarrassed that you did that wasn't fueled by an emotional reaction.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
Okay. So then check this out because this is so cool. Once I learned this, it's called an algorithm for achievement. This is rooted in NLP. If you are or are not getting the results, so we start at results. If you're not getting the results that you want in life, I want you to draw an arrow to the right in your head if you can't see this and you're listening. And that draws back to your actions. Okay. Now, your actions come from your decisions. Your decisions come from your thoughts. Your thoughts come from your emotions. And then what people do not realize is that their emotions come from the meaning, values, and beliefs that they assign to the experience. So in reverse, experiences drive your meaning and results. Experiences into you assign meaning and beliefs to the experience. That creates an emotion. The emotion drives the thought drives the decision drives the action or action you do not take, and thus the result that you want or you do not want. And so what we can say simplistically is that the results that you are or are not getting in your life are directly tied back to experiences. And so what we have to do is we have to go back and do the trauma work on usually experiences that happen from the age of 4 to 7, 14. Some of us in our teenage years, there's some things to unpack there, but usually by 16, 17, we kind of start getting, away from approval of our parents. And so you have to go back into those experiences, which people don't want to do because there's pain in those experiences. And what you've done is you've compartmentalized that pain in your subconscious so deep that it's in there. It's in there and it's stored by emotion. And you have to unpack the pain. The pain that's inside of you is worth its weight in gold. You have to go in there and dig it out. And as soon as you dig it out and unpack it, you literally create a void for the potential you want in your life. But you're not attracting what you want in life because you're filled with compartmentalized negativity and pain that you have not processed. And all of your 95% of your day is the subconscious compartmentalized programs and pain and experiences that you've kept buried. And can I give you an example and an experience of how to do one of these reframes?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. So in NLP, you have associated and disassociated dreams and thoughts. Cause like you guys probably aren't even aware of this. I'm about to blow your mind, but I have to set all of this up in sequence. So bear with me so this all makes sense. When you have a dream, you have two types of dreams, associated and disassociated dreams. An associated dream is when you're dreaming in the mental movie reel in your head, that image that's in your head, you are first person perspective, right? So like the camera view is like literally out your eyeballs. You're like the first person character on a video game. You're in the 3D world. We only have pleasant and good and happy memories and dreams in that associated perspective. Because we're close to it. We're right there in it. We're in the muck, right? We reach out and touch it. Now, painful experiences and painful dreams and nightmares, things of this nature, I won't say nightmares, but painful experiences and dreams that we're recalling or reliving, we do it with disassociated view. And so that means in like a 3D, or like if you've seen a movie and the camera is like way back in the room and it's a wide angle lens, you can see everyone in the room. Like you're going to do it from really far away. Now, why? Because it's painful and you don't want to be near it. So you view it from afar because you don't want to hurt.
Sure.
Right? And so here's my example. It's a painful example for me. It's something that it's taking me a lifetime. And by the way, I just fixed this problem. I just fixed this problem. I have not seen my father for 22 years. My father never seen me as an adult male. He's never met one of my girlfriends. My mom, dad, and me haven't been together in 30 years. I haven't seen my dad in 22 years. I just got him to finally come see me 17 days ago at my bodybuilding competition.
It's amazing.
And the reason that happened is because on my podcast, I was teaching what I'm about to teach you now. And some other life events happened. His mom, my grandmother died recently. And I ran this exercise. And this is what allowed me to finally let go and re-engage in a conversation. And so you could do this with any painful memory. Doesn't matter what it is. And remember, information plus emotion equals long-term memory. So the more painful the experience, the more emotion it created, the longer you're going to remember it, good or bad. For most of us, it's the pain. So my father was a severe alcoholic, drug addict, in jail the majority of my life, and I rarely got to see him. And he never really showed up to a football game, a practice. I told you I love sports. He just never showed up. And the weekends he had custody of me as a young kid, he didn't show up. I mean, he showed up once in a while, but it was like 10% of the time. Okay. And so I finally got him to show up 17 days ago for the biggest day of my life, which was pretty cool. So I have this really painful memory of being a child. I grew up on that 75-acre horse farm. It was like an old house from the 1900s, had like the old, porch on the front, like very stereotypical story. Young 6-7-year-old Nick sitting on the porch step, summer evening, sky lit up, beautiful, and waiting for my dad. I'd always know my dad was coming because I could hear the sound of the motorcycle engine. So that's how I knew it was my dad. Like, this is back in like the late 90s, I mean, late 80s. So yeah, I was a young kid rode on the back of a motorcycle, probably with no helmet, my dad. And my dad never showed up. I'd wait and I wait and I wait. Dad never showed up. And what that did as a young child, it made me feel incredibly unworthy. I could never understand how my father, still emotional, could love a bottle more than he loved his own fucking flesh and blood. Even as a young child, it fucking destroyed me. Because all I wanted him to do was just show up to one game so I could show him how good I was. But I couldn't get him to not spend the fucking paycheck on Friday at the bar. It's just gone. Right? And so I let that situation, that unworthiness and that pain of that experience as a young child cripple me in my subconscious programming for a very long time. That lack of unworthiness showed up everywhere, including in that example you used with that woman. She's winning and winning and winning, but she's feeling unworthy of the wins. And so I felt unworthy, and I had to become someone else in order to earn my father's love. So I sacrificed my true identity to become someone else to earn my father's love. I had to become a party animal. The times I were with him, I had to drink and go to parties and bars. Like I was a little kid sitting at the bar eating Slim Jims and pickled eggs in the 80s. And then so what happened? What happened when I got older and the stress of life came down? I ran the soothing tactics and this identity of this person I had to become to earn my father's love, which is a party animal and a drinker. And I became an alcoholic and a smoker, and I paid for it with cancer. So we can go into that memory. When I used to have that memory, it was disassociated. So I lived in the mountains. So I'd always remember it with young Nick way out in the woods, looking down on the porch and reliving the memory over and over and over again, like how much it hurt, the feelings of unworthiness, like this is happening all over again. It could be something at work where my boss made me feel unworthy, and bam, that memory is triggered, and I'm running the programmings and the automatic fixed action behaviors of that emotion. I didn't realize it back then, but that's how I was responding every time. And so now, in order to reframe that negative experience, I have to go into it. I have to go into the memory. And so now about associated and disassociated. I always viewed that painfully disassociated, disattached, really far camera angle looking into the experience. So now what I do, and you don't do this just once. You got to do this a bunch when you're really down and you need it. And you're feeling that unworthiness, that lack of contribution and significance in your life. Now, the adult 38-year-old Nick, he walks into the memory. And the question is, what does adult Nick want to say to the young boy Nick waiting for his father? Because my dad never showed. So now it's time for me, the adult male, to show up in my life, in that child's life, and tell that child what he needs to hear. And so the adult Nick goes and walks up. Now, associated dream. It's me. I'm right there. It's first person. I walk up to the young boy, the young Nick, and I tell him what he needs to hear, which is, I love you. You are loved, and you are enough. And that's how you have to go into these memories and these experiences, no matter how painful they are. And I know some of you are listening or have way more painful experiences than I've ever gone through in my life. But let me tell you, if you're not where you are at in life, it's because you do not have the identity to support the outcome.